I'm Sabine Alden, 30 years old, environmental consultant, and, until that dinner, the daughter who never caused trouble. That Sunday night, I showed up to family dinner with a bottle of red and a polite smile, prepared to sit through another hour of lukewarm roast and recycled small talk. What I didn't expect was for my father to lean back, carve into a steak, and casually announce, "Tessa will be moving into your apartment next weekend." Not ask, not suggest, just declare. I almost laughed, almost. But then I looked across the table and saw my mother already checking her calendar. And my sister, oh, my sister, was sipping her wine like this had all been worked out days ago. That's when I knew. They weren't waiting for my opinion. The apartment I had spent 5 years saving for, the space that had become my sanctuary, my proof that I'd carved a life out of nothing, they'd just handed it to someone else. They thought I'd nod, like always. They thought I'd swallow my objections, like always. They thought wrong. This time, I had a plan of my own, and it started with letting a stranger open the door. When people talk about family, they rarely mention the quiet architecture of favoritism. How it's not always grand gestures, but the small, relentless ones, the subtle erasures, the silent assumptions that do the damage. I was the middle child in a family that swore they didn't play favorites, but everyone knew better. Tessa, my younger sister by 4 years, was the golden one. Bright, bubbly, effortlessly adored. Her college painting shows were funded by my parents, her failed ventures chalked up to life experience, and her messes, always someone else's to clean up. Meanwhile, I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college and drove the same dented Toyota Corolla for nearly a decade. They said I was so independent, like it was a compliment. What they meant was, "You don't need us, so we won't show up." The apartment in the Pearl District was more than an address. It was years of missed birthdays, skipped vacations, and Sunday nights tutoring high schoolers in algebra while my friends went out. I signed the lease 2 years ago, and every time I walked through that front door, it felt like a quiet victory. Brick walls, sunlit floors, a space that finally belonged to me, not because it was given, but because it was earned. Tessa, on the other hand, treated stability like a pit stop. After every breakup, she'd show up at our parents' place with tear-streaked cheeks and an overstuffed duffel, and they'd hand her the keys to a car, a guest room, a new beginning, again and again. Once I needed emergency housing after a pipe burst in my first apartment. Tessa told me her guest room was off-limits because it was being used for art storage. My parents suggested I figure it out. That was the pattern. Sabine the solver, Tessa the saved. Lately, though, something had shifted. After years of therapy and self-work, I'd stopped confusing peacekeeping with self-respect. I'd started saying no, softly at first, then with more clarity. When I declined to host at first, then with more clarity. When I declined to host Thanksgiving last year, my mother made a comment about how strange it was that I wouldn't uphold family traditions. But I did it anyway. I was learning how to breathe without asking permission. Still, I kept the monthly dinners. They were my last olive branch, 90 minutes of conversation and eye contact, just enough to avoid being labeled the ungrateful one. And they usually ended with my quiet retreat back to my own world. But this dinner? It was different. This dinner would break the pattern. The Sunday it all happened, I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. It was a small rebellion, barely noticeable to anyone but me. My mother still greeted me with a stiff hug and a pointed glance at the clock. My father launched straight into commentary about Portland traffic, as if I'd been gone for months, not just running late by design. Tessa was already there, lounging on the couch like she owned the place, legs draped over the armrest, wearing boots that probably cost more than my month's rent. She waved without getting up, wine glass in hand, phone in the other. Her performance of casualness was perfected, as if she were a guest star in her own life, waiting for someone to write her next scene. Dinner began like every other. My father monopolizing conversation with politics and market trends, my mother fishing for updates, but mostly wanting to talk about the neighbors' remodeling plans. I offered my usual sanitized report on work, keeping it bland enough to avoid criticism, but not so bland they'd accuse me of withholding. I was midway through describing a wetlands restoration project when my father cleared his throat, the signal that someone was about to drop a bomb. "Tessa has some news," he announced, glancing at her like a proud MC introducing a headline act. She looked up from her phone and gave a perfectly timed sigh. "Jason and I broke up." Jason. Right. The crypto bro with opinions about everything and empathy for nothing. I'd met him once. He'd spent the entire evening explaining why government regulation was a scam. Apparently, the lease was still in his name, and he was insisting she keep paying, even though she was moving out. "It's just not fair," Tessa added, her voice laced with performative exhaustion. My mother reached over to squeeze her hand. "She shouldn't have to go through this on top of heartbreak." I nodded, mostly to keep things moving. But then came the twist. "So," my father said, slicing into his steak with the precision of a judge delivering a verdict, "we've figured it out. Tessa will move into your place for now." He didn't look at me. No one did. My mother was already planning aloud. "You work late anyway, and there's that spare room. We can move her stuff next Saturday." The steak turned to sand in my mouth. "I actually use that room," I said evenly, choosing each word with care. "It's my office." "You can work at the kitchen table," Tessa said with a laugh, waving her hand like she was solving a crossword. My dad leaned back. "It's just temporary. My dad leaned back. "It's just temporary. Family helps family." Ah, that phrase. The ultimate hammer. Family helps family. Unless you need help, unless you're the one asking. I watched them plan the dismantling of my sanctuary like it was a group vacation. They didn't even ask if I'd be home next weekend. They just assumed I'd be available and agreeable. That tightness in my chest returned, the one I knew too well, the one that came every time I was expected to bend. "I'll need to check my lease about long-term guests," I said, smiling like it didn't cost me something. My mother waved her hand. "That's just a formality." Of course it was, to them, but not to me. I helped clear the dishes in silence, but my mind was already moving. For the first time, I wasn't rehearsing how to explain myself. I was planning a way out, and this time I wasn't going to ask permission. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't call a friend to vent. I made tea, turned on the lamp beside my reading chair, and opened my lease. Page 12. Subletting prohibited without prior written approval. Guests staying more than 14 consecutive days require background checks and must be added to the lease. Perfect. I didn't see those clauses as obstacles. I saw them as armor. Next, I called Blake. He was a colleague from another firm, sharp, quiet, recently divorced, and currently staying in a temporary rental while his condo was being repaired. A week ago, he'd mentioned needing a place for a few weeks. "Would you be interested in staying at my place while I'm away on a work trip?" I asked, keeping my tone professional. "You'd be fully covered under a short-term sublease." Blake didn't hesitate. "That would actually help a lot. Are you sure?" "I'm sure." The next morning, I visited the building office, where Tanya, the property manager, recognized me immediately. "I'm planning to be away for a couple weeks," I told her casually. I wanted to confirm the policies around guests and temporary occupants. She handed me a printed packet. "We don't allow anyone to stay longer than 2 weeks without approval. Security will stop anyone not on the lease. No exceptions. Even if they claim to be family? Especially then." That afternoon, I drafted a clean, formal sublease for Blake, filed it with Tanya, and scheduled a walkthrough of my apartment for the following evening. I also rented a small storage unit and quietly moved out anything irreplaceable. My journals, family heirlooms, documents, my backup hard drives. That same night, I received a message from Tessa. "Should I bring my own bed or just use yours?" I stared at the text for a moment, then replied, "Still figuring out logistics. Let's talk next week." Vague, polite, useless. The next few days passed like chess. My parents sent texts asking about visitor parking, shelf space, closet clearing, all under the assumption that I was preparing for her arrival. I replied when necessary. kept it brief. Let them mistake my quiet for consent. Wednesday evening, Blake came by. I walked him through the place, handed over keys, and explained the situation carefully. If my family shows up, you don't have to explain anything, Eng, I said. Just let them know you're the legal occupant during this time. He raised an eyebrow. That bad? They mean well, but they don't listen. This is the only language they understand. He nodded slowly. Don't worry, I've dealt with people who assume they own what isn't theirs. Friday morning, I bought a weekend ticket to a quiet hotel on the coast and requested remote work access through my job. Personal reasons, minimal details. By Friday night, I'd installed a security camera facing my front door. I gave Blake the access code and emailed the building office my travel schedule. Everything was logged, filed, approved. Saturday, I packed my suitcase, turned off family notifications on my phone, and took one last slow walk through the apartment. I paused in the office, where my diploma hung next to a framed map of the wetlands I'd helped protect. They thought that room didn't matter. They had no idea. As I locked the door and stepped into the elevator, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not fear, not guilt, control. Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear, a perfect fall day in the Pacific Northwest. I woke in my quiet hotel room 30 minutes from home and checked my phone. 12 missed calls, 5 from my mother, 3 from my father, 4 from Tessa. The last text, timestamp 10:45 a.m. Read, "We're almost there, don't make this difficult." At exactly 11:03 a.m. My security app pinged, motion detected. I opened the feed and watched it happen in real time. There they were, my parents and Tessa, standing outside my apartment door. My father knocked with growing force. My mother rang the bell again and again. Tessa stood behind them, talking on her phone, gesturing with increasing frustration. Then the door opened. Blake stepped into view, coffee mug in hand, calm as sunrise. He said something I couldn't hear, but the way my father leaned forward, then recoiled, told me he hadn't expected to see a stranger. My mother froze, one hand pressed to her chest. Tessa's expression collapsed into disbelief. Moments later, a security officer appeared, arms folded, clearly explaining protocol. My father pulled out his phone, likely trying to escalate things to building management. It didn't work. They were escorted to the elevator without setting foot inside. My phone exploded immediately after. My father's voicemail. "This is unacceptable. That man is not authorized. We'll be contacting your landlord." My mother's. "Sabine, how could you humiliate us like this? Your sister is heartbroken. She has nowhere to go." Tessa's message was pure fury. "You're a monster. You didn't even tell me. You blindsided us. I hope you're proud of yourself." I turned the volume down and ordered room service. Later, Blake called. "They tried everything," he said, almost amused. "Your dad claimed I forged the paperwork. Security reminded him that's a criminal accusation. He shut up after that." I thanked him again. "Are you still okay staying there?" "Absolutely. They can pound on the door all they want. It's locked." By evening, the text shifted from anger to emotional bait. A photo of Tessa sitting on our parents' couch, surrounded by boxes. "This is what your stubbornness has done," my mother wrote. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the more unhinged messages to my friend June, a paralegal who had agreed to keep a record, just in case things got ugly. "They're spiraling," she texted back, "which means it's working. Hold your ground." That night, I muted every thread except work and Blake. The rest could wait. I lay in bed, not shaking, not crying, just breathing. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone's daughter or sister or fallback plan. I felt like myself. Monday came with silence. Not peace, just the kind of silence that suggests regrouping. My phone barely lit up until noon, when my father sent a text. "Rachel's furniture is sitting in a rented moving truck. It's costing us daily fees. What do you suggest we do with it?" Not "can we talk?" Not "we made a mistake." Just logistics. I didn't answer. By 3 p.m., a voicemail from my mother arrived, more composed this time. Tessa could just stay for 2 weeks. We can pay you rent, if that's what this is about. Family helps family. That phrase again. As if this were about money. As if I had placed a price on my boundaries. I sat in a cafe near the coast, watching the ocean churn against the rocks, and realized something deeply unsettling. My family truly didn't understand what they had done. Not out of malice, but out of entitlement so deep they couldn't see past it. That evening, a text came from the unlikeliest source. My brother Dylan. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Tessa's been whining all day. I don't know exactly what went down, but respect. Whatever you did, damn. It was the first message from any family member that didn't try to guilt me. It made me exhale, just a little. Tuesday morning, building management emailed me a note. Your father attempted to dispute the legality of the sublease. We confirmed all documentation is valid and properly filed. No further action required. They had tried every door, every trick, every guilt trip, and it hadn't worked. That night, I began researching family therapists in our area. Not for now, but maybe for later. For when the dust settled. For if any of them ever wanted to rebuild something real. By Wednesday, their efforts softened. My grandmother called. A sweet woman, but always deployed when emotional manipulation needed reinforcements. Tessa's had a hard time lately, honey. She just needed a little support. I know you're strong, but sometimes the strong ones forget how to be soft. I didn't call back. I couldn't. I wouldn't. Thursday brought another message from my dad, this time less aggressive, more transactional. We're looking at apartment listings for Tessa. Let us know when you're ready to discuss what happened. It was apartment listings for Tessa. Let us know when you're ready to discuss what happened. It wasn't an apology, but it was a pivot. Friday morning, I replied, I'm glad you're helping Tessa look for a place. I'll be back in town tomorrow and willing to meet Saturday afternoon. No explanation, no apology, just clarity. I returned to my apartment late that night. Blake had tidied everything, left a thank you note, and a spare key on the counter. The place smelled like lavender and clean sheets. Home. I took a long shower, made tea, and sat at my desk. The desk they thought I could just replace with a kitchen table. Tomorrow would be uncomfortable, but it wouldn't undo what I had built, because now they would be meeting a different version of me. One they didn't get to define. We met at a quiet coffee shop that Saturday. A neutral space, no memories, no furniture anyone could claim. I arrived early, settled into a corner table, and waited. My parents came in first, composed but cautious. Tessa followed, quieter than usual, her face unreadable. My father began, I think you owe us an explanation for what happened last weekend. I kept my tone calm. Actually, we need to talk about why you made decisions about my apartment without involving me at all. That stopped them. They deflected, like they always had. It was temporary. You're always so generous. We thought you'd understand. But I'd heard it all before. This time, I didn't excuse it. I asked plainly, would you have done the same if it were Dylan's apartment? The silence was heavy. Tessa finally broke it. I didn't know they hadn't talked to you, she said. They told me you were fine with it. I thought I was walking into something agreed on. She looked right at me. I'm sorry, Sabine, that wasn't okay. I nodded. Thank you for saying that. We talked, not to fix everything, but to start unpacking it. I told them what I needed, to be treated like an adult, not a backup plan, that my boundaries weren't optional, that I wouldn't keep pretending silence meant agreement. Before we left, my mother reached out, not to hug me, just a hand placed beside mine on the table. We didn't mean to push you out, she said. We'll try to do better. I believed her, maybe not completely, but enough. That night, I returned to my apartment. Same walls, same light, same couch, but everything felt changed, because I had changed. And in that stillness, I knew something for certain. This space wasn't just where I lived. It was proof that I could choose myself, even when no one else did.